I'm always telling you guys how you could play fantasy esports at EsportPools, but it actually seemed as if TSM fans and TSM players themselves were playing fantasy EsportPools because, first of all, they seemed convinced that TSM would 6-0 their group. They didn't seem aware of any of the dangers that are out there or any of the problems that TSM's had historically internationally. Bjergsen and Doublelift were supposed to be the best players at their positions in the group because, we didn't exactly have the strongest teams in this group overall. Ones that ended up performing pretty well, for example, the obvious choice is Misfits, right? They came in pretty underrated. Actually, I think people have learned over this tournament that Hauntzer improved, etc. Alfari got a lot better. Obviously, Power of Evil did what Power of Evil somehow does against Bjergsen. So, everything did change, but you could have certainly had an interesting case to make that in the fantasy world, at least, that could have worked out for TSM. You could also bet on the games. They have live in-play betting. Actually, that might just be for CS. I don't know how that works. You'd have to have a look. I'm not the actual people vending the site, right? So TSM at the Season 7 World Championship failed to get out of their group, obviously lost in a tiebreaker situation, and expectations as a result were dashed because this was a good group for them, was pretty much the best group you could almost have hoped for with the rules on how the region dodging works where WE couldn't have gone into another group, etc. once those playing teams were set. So here are a layman's takes and perspectives on what happened in the game, but someone who's watched the game a decent amount of time and has watched many esports. And obviously, I'll do an episode Narrative Wake where I get people far more knowledgeable than I am to give insightful comments about the game. So let's start and go down the map, shall we? We're not going to just start with who's at blame or who did the best, but coincidentally, we are starting with who did the best by starting at the top of the map with Hauntzer. Because actually, this tournament showed me a new dimension to Hauntzer that I'd never seen outside of NA before. See, here's the thing. Hauntzer is always good, if not very good, in NA, and that's why he's considered one of the best top laners. Now, I have my own reasons as to why I don't think he's the best, because he plays in a region where there are some carry top laners who have all the resources pumped into them and literally carry the game and make their teams much better than they otherwise would be. But that's a whole separate issue about how I judge what the best top laner is and how we judge positions outside the context of who their team is. Because what I would say about players like Hauntzer, and this is something I will make a point about in a separate video, because I'm going to address the Hauntzer issue and this whole carry top versus tank top issue. I would put it this way. In the current climate, especially in this current meta, generally those tank top laners are better top laners, like they fit the current meta of what a top laner should probably do and how you can most effectively win the game, especially when so many people are playing through bot or playing through mid. But I don't think they're actually overall better players than the best carry top laners, who I think are more skilled players and more skilled overall star level talents. But you notice I didn't say more skilled top laners, because at the moment, perhaps top lane's not about that. Now, again, I'm not going to get in the whole thing, but in other games, we see how you can have positions where you don't play them like the traditional way to play that position, which is how I think those top lane carries should be used. Anyway, separate issue, isn't it? So the point I'm making is, Hauntzer is clearly very good in NA, but when he's come internationally, he has fallen apart completely and hasn't done any of the shit that he did in NA. You think of last year's Worlds, he really had some serious issues in that tournament and looked like, yes, it was his first massive international tournament, but he broke down big time. Then you go and you look this year at MSI, right? Yes, they were in that situation where Doublelift was out and they were trying to play sometimes more through top lane sometimes, and then also he was trying to have a shot calling presence, which seemed to mess with him a bit. But all in all, you add those two international tournaments together, and people love to rag on Perks when he had a bad Worlds last year and a bad MSI, etc. But you have to look at Hauntzer and say, this was not looking good internationally. It looked like he succeeds, because aside from those top lane carries I referenced in NA, by the way, both of which are on much worse teams than TSM, aside from those guys, in general, yes, Hauntzer dominated, but against weak competition or against people who aren't in a position to battle him and beat him with their squads. So you can look internationally, and this is the first tournament where I saw Hauntzer play at a world-class level, but within his style. In this tournament, Hauntzer played like a man, because some of his teammates didn't. Some of his teammates played scared or made stupid mistakes. Some of them didn't play as a team. Some of them looked like going into it in terms of, I presume, what input they had in the pick ban, like they weren't confident in themselves, like they were uncomfortable. Hauntzer didn't look like that at all during this whole tournament. He was willing to play anything, generally did pretty well in most cases, and there were even games where he did really well and he played like a man and the others let him down, and in the end he has to go and have a loss on his record, but he played well enough to win the game. Like, think about the first game that they played against Misfits. It was one where he was playing Renekton, I think Alfari was playing Shen, and that was the game where Doublelift was having some massive problems. Hauntzer kept continually almost like giving him the alley-oop, like, oh, I'm going to keep helping you, going to keep helping you, going to keep putting you in position to succeed here, I'm going to carry the fucking game here, and Doublelift just could not do it, just could not come through. They lost the game, but Hauntzer played very, very well in that match, and looked like the best top laner in the group, one of the best in the tournament. Then you go and you look at the second Misfits game they played, the one that they won. He had a Yasuo picked into him when he's a Gnar. Right, you remember what happened when Darshan in that Season 5 Summer Final played Yasuo into, I think it was Dyrus's Gnar, was it? And just fucked him up all kinds of nasty. Now, this isn't Dyrus. I know what people build Hauntzer as like, oh, he's the new Dyrus, right? Dyrus could play carry and play tank like in Season 2, coming into Season 3, but by the time Dyrus retired, he was just a tank player, and for that era, you could have made him like a carry top laner, but first of all, you need to completely rejig the way TSM does their team, quite clearly, and he probably needs to play for a slightly worse team. He's not going to be the best top laner in NA. The difference is, Hauntzer actually does show us these games, he's still best suited on tanks. People don't realize that you can actually still play a carry style through a tank. You can still play a Gnar, a Maokai, and still be very dominant in the game. I mean, obviously, then it depends more on resources that's being put through you. But we do see these big games, and I think he's better suited to have these massive games when he's on those still tank-esque champions. So that game, he just controlled the Yasuo. He didn't let it get out of control, and therefore this cheese pick into him didn't do fuck all, and they were actually able to win a key game that could have gotten them closer to getting out of the group. Then you look at the first World Elite game, yeah, looked good for Doublelift, etc. But Hauntzer, again, killed it. He looked really good. So you see, he's playing versus nearly all the teams in the group and doing pretty well overall. Because that's the thing about a top laner, okay? You know the really good to great top laners because they play like men. Because the top lane is a place for men. The carries in the top lane, they're the guys who lead by example. They're like, give me all the resources, put everything on my back, give me this pick, or if I've got a bad pick, let's focus me early, and I will get ahead, I will stay ahead, I'll maintain, we'll carry the game through me, and they don't have to shot call, they don't have to ask anything, but they lead by example, and that's why you give them those picks, you give them those resources, and you follow them, and you know they can carry the game for you. Like, yeah, that's not Hauntzer. Hauntzer is more the tank style player, but the way he leads in that sense, that's another quality of being a man, is to care for others, to be responsible for others, to say, you know what, I'll take the load from you so that you can have a breathing space at this point in the game where it's going to be tough for you, or it's going to be difficult for you, or I'll set you up to be more successful later in the game, and you know what, you'll get all the credits for the kills and looking good and was winning the game, but I'm the one who put you in position to do that. So that's the kind of style that Hauntzer has been playing at this tournament, and he played a little bit of carry, but largely he played like a man, like that. Because you know what? While he was playing well, his mid had games where he just looked completely checked out mentally and just doing next to nothing and wasn't even playing around the map, which is what Bjergsen's most famous for. His AD carry had a couple of games where he just straight up didn't get any advantages in lane, fucked up later on, underperformed, got caught. So in the midst of the other true carries of TSM, fucking up, not having good games, Hauntzer continued to play well because that's what top laners do. Because top laners can't feed. Top laners can't just do nothing on the map and then hope you're going to win the game. Good top laners know, first of all, you can't feed in lane. If you start to die, you have to play from a deficit. If you die too many times and you get ganked by the enemy jungler, it's not even your fault, and your jungler doesn't set up any vision, doesn't come and clear anything. Well, you know what? In that scenario, you still have to take responsibility again like a man and say, you know what? Time for me to just build tank items. No more damage for me, I'm afraid. That's what you have to do. You have to sacrifice. You have to be responsible when you're Hauntzer's type of top lane, and that's what he does. He plays from a deficit. He plays well when he gets an even matchup and not too much jungle interference. He's someone where He has to play well because that's what a good top laner does. The mid and AD carry, they can have their games. The superstars, they can have their games where they're zeros. The top laner, especially his kind of top laner, has to play well, and he played like a man, so great performance by Hauntzer. Then you go over and you look at Svenskeren, right? He is going to get so much shit for this Worlds because he's been getting so much shit all year long. In fact, basically, from beyond like the first split and a half of him being in TSM, he's always gotten shit. People think he's a bot, that he's terrible, that he's just a shitty ward that moves around the map. Fuck that narrative. This guy, when he played in Europe, was a beast counter jungler, a duelist. He went in your jungle early, and either the pressure and the threat of him being there changed how you played, or he came in and he fucked you up 1v1, and you had to start bringing someone with you, or you had to start taking a different route, and you had to be concerned early on in the game about where this guy was. Otherwise, you knew that you could be starting the whole game at a deficit and it was going to be really tough. Now, yeah, is he the best at warding? Did he ever truly understand vision control? Doesn't really seem like it. But you know what? When you let this guy play that way and you give him the champions to play that way, and then he has lanes that are going to interact with him and not just leave him on his own to go off on fucking non-carry junglers and just go off into the jungle by himself and then get caught because he doesn't have the best game sense in that particular guy. Yeah, he's going to look like shit. TSM has left this guy. They've hung him out to dry entirely. So you know what? He is completely misused in this team. And that's why I have a hard time critiquing him. Yes, if I forget all of his past and I just look at how he played now, he's a shit jungler. In this meta and the way he's playing right now and the way he's used in this team, it is a waste of time. Cut him tomorrow. But you know what? He could be used for so much more. If you put him on a team where he can be aggressive, where they play around him, where people help the jungle, where he's not just expected to be a bot moving around farming and then every now and then going and placing a ward and basically just coming to help top lane or going and just making sure mid's warded, which apparently seems to be what a Bjergsen jungler has to do. I don't know whether that's coming from Bjergsen or the coach or what, but that's an issue. And this is an issue you have to ask about when you talk about Svenskeren, is clearly he needs to be on a team where he's aggressive, where he's making these plays, but every single jungler who seems to come to TSM gets turned into these passive farm-up junglers. And they seem to have to play a certain way. So is that coming from the coaching staff and their philosophy on how to play the game? Is it coming from Bjergsen, the way he wants them to be played? He's clearly the star player. You clearly do put a lot of focus, as it should, through him. Is that what Bjergsen thinks a jungler's supposed to do? It's concerning because this is a group where Svenskeren was one of the most abused and exploited players in the group because all the other teams at least had good junglers, at least had junglers who are proactive and will make plays, and that costs Svenskeren because first of all, when he just farmed up, that's not his skill set, so he's just wasting his time. And then when he tried to make plays, he was on his own, he was left out on an island, he was fucked, he'd caught out, and he would just feed the game at that point. So he has a choice. Get behind, not do much in the game, maybe do what the coaches are telling you, and then you have to hope all the lanes win, or he can make plays and potentially just feed the game on an international stage. So I feel like he was in a terrible situation. Yes, he played like shit, but he's also, it's a complete waste of time to use him this way, especially when he's an import. If you're going to use an import, fucking go get an NA player who can do that. Or get a really good player who's an import and can play the style you want him to play. Now you go over and look at Bjergsen. This is a really tough one for me, because when we had this discussion on Narrative Wake, I thought Gilius made some pretty good points. When you look at Bjergsen, too much of his career has been us going the other way, of going, well, TSM didn't win, and we know TSM isn't good enough, and in the past, before this era of lineups, some of the TSM lineups just clearly weren't good enough when they still had Dyrus and they still had Wild Turtle. So you looked at these players and you were like, well, can't blame Bjergsen too much. These players aren't good enough. He did a great job to help them win NA, but they're clearly not good enough internationally. And as long as he just does all right internationally, and he has like the one big game, and then he has the games that are average, and then maybe one bad game, we go, you know what? It's not his fault. Still a really good player. Doesn't have the resources. Doesn't have a team. That doesn't work anymore. Now he does have the resources. Now he does have the team. Now is where, when the other team has games they're playing decently, he should be the best player in the whole server. He should be the guy who's one of the MVP level candidates of the tournament. He should be carrying his team out of groups. He should be getting them past series. He should be having those huge monster carry games like the other really good mid laners do, like the other really good superstars in League of Legends do. And you have to say, looking at his MSI and his world performances over the years, he doesn't really do that. Like, it's just not the case. He has the 1 or 2 games at each Worlds where he goes pretty well and goes ham. Then he has a couple where he just does nothing. That doesn't happen from superstars. And then he maybe has like the one bad game each Worlds where he just does badly individually and he does fuck it up a bit. So I think Bjergsen has performance issues. That's my take on it. I still think he's a good player. I still think he has the potential to be a very good player and to be a top 5 player at a tournament like this. But he doesn't have the same big game impact. And that's why I take it back to performance issue. Because I feel like his mentality in the game changes to this aspect of when it's going badly or when he doesn't feel comfortable how it's going, then I feel like he reverts to like a don't play not to lose mode. Like he doesn't want to make the mistake. Like he wants to just keep waiting and stalling. And in NA, maybe he does that and he gets slight edges back or he gains back from the deficit and then he waits for his one big chance to make the great play. That's not happening internationally. The game's dead already long before they get to those situations. TSM isn't getting to these late game team fights where they can win 5v5. It's not happening for them. Or if they do, they're in such a bad situation, they're not going to win them. So Bjergsen had some games where he tried some roams. They certainly were not as successful as the LCS, and yet that's what he's famed for. In terms of pure laning, also a little bit underwhelming, you know. He wasn't the monster you'd hope he would be overall. And then just in terms of star performance on the game, way too few games rather, where he just didn't have the big performance yet. I realize he had other issues in his team, but he has to take some of the burden for this one as well, in my opinion. Though he's clearly not the main scapegoat, I don't think he should be placed as that. And I think he was right to call that out. So now we'll go to the bot lane, where there were a lot of issues. So Doublelift, first and foremost, Doublelift's strength is supposed to be 2v2. There's two strengths of Doublelift. Lane dominant AD carry, late game, super late game, team fight damage output, right? We obviously never got to fucking see the second part, and part of that's because of how he fucked up the first part. But, you know what? First of all, ignore when he got caught, ignore the games they lost, just look at the lanes. Doublelift didn't really win many lanes, did he? This 2v2 did not win many lanes. They got greedy in trades. Doublelift seems to just be the guy where I almost feel like I'd like to see okay, this might sound abstract. I would like to see Doublelift, when they next do a Korean boot camp, play Korean solo queue and with LS coaching him, right? You know, where LS watches a game that you played back and he pauses it, he talks to you. Because Doublelift does shit in lane that like LS teaches these guys who are like platinum and below, like, oh, don't do that. Like, see where you attacked him here. Like at this particular point in the game, unless your support's with you or your support's in an advanced position here, and if you look at where the minions are, like, it's just not going to work, this trade for you. Doublelift does those, but he tries them, like, over and over and over and over and over again. I feel like Doublelift, because in his era, where he was still a very good player in NA, but he was on CLG and he didn't go to Worlds, is when Uzi rose up. I feel like Doublelift saw Uzi and saw Forgiven in Europe play, because it's the same sort of era, and he was like, right, I have to play that style, and I have to punish them all the time. Except the difference is, when they do it, they're immaculate at how they punish you, because what they do is they make you have this choice every time. Do you want to hit the CS? Do you want to get hit by me? Do you want to hit the CS? Do you want to get hit by me? If you hit me as well and we both hit each other, well, then let's just gamble and play chicken and see who can go as far down as we want. If you want the CS, you're going to take a bit of damage and therefore you're not going to get as much CS later. So they are immaculate at that. Doublelift actually isn't that great at that. He's still a very good laner. He's got his own style to laning, but that style doesn't seem to suit him because it involves you constantly making the correct decision and then making a good adaptive decision based on what the opponent does. And that seems to be where there's a disconnect with this guy. Again, by the way, I'm a complete layman. I don't claim to be an expert in League of Legends. In some of these games, he still has that problem where he doesn't seem to understand that once you get out of lane, once we're roaming, once we're moving around the map, he has to be the most careful of all players on TSM. Because if he's got any gold funneled into him, and especially in this meta with the fucking Ardent Sensor where you want to get him late game, so he's got mad damage and attack speed, in this scenario, you want him to be as careful as possible to get to that point in the game. Instead, he does these weird, like, random or greedy or just ill thought out moves that get him caught. And when he gets caught a couple of times, he has been irresponsible with the gold funneled into him because he's dying, because he's now putting the other team up, because he's now putting his team in a position where they can't make plays for a little while. And he does that. Not loads, because it's unrealistic in 6 games they expect to happen 10 times. But there'll always be those 2 or 3 times that stick out in your mind where you go, fuck, why is he doing that at this point of the game? Like, lane, let the others do shit now, stay very safe, and wait till that team fight, then you can dominate, then you can be the star, then even if you didn't have a great laning phase, you're not trying to make something up in the mid game now, wait till later on, and then you can carry with your positioning and your damage output in the team fight. It seems like he never waited for that last part of the condition, so he never got to do it, and as a result, all we saw was the mediocre laning and then getting caught and looking like shit. Then you've got to consider that I feel like he's a really good player to contrast with Bjergsen, because when I said that Bjergsen, when he feels uncomfortable and when he gets pressured and it's the big game where they're going to lose in groups, Bjergsen goes the other way and tries to do less, seemingly, and therefore loses the game but doesn't look utterly terrible, and you just think, well, what could he have done? Doublelift, it feels like, does the opposite. When he feels uncomfortable, when he feels threatened, when he feels pressured, he goes, right, press the big attack button. We got to go all out. We're going to do some shit now. We're going to make a play. We're going to be a hero. I'm not a loser. Fuck, I'm not a loser. I'm not a choker. Right, well, what would someone who's not a loser and not a choker do? They'd make the hero play. And he goes and makes the hero play. That fucks it all up. That's the thing. I would actually want them to play the opposite style. I'd rather Bjergsen was the one who was like, right, you know what? This isn't going that well. I probably was a little bit too conservative in the pick ban here. You know what? I'm going to start roaming bottom. I'm going to start getting kills there. I'm going to start rolling them there. I'm going to help my jungler out. Instead, he does less. I'd want it to be the other way, and then Doublelift should go, right, well, the lane's not going amazingly, and you know what? But you know what? Bjergsen's doing all right at the moment, and Hauntzer's doing fine in top lane. Sven's only been caught a couple of times. You know what? I'll just play conservatively. I'll get big. I'll get my farm. I'll get to the late game, and even with a slight disadvantage or a kill or two down, I can probably still fuck these other guys up by being better with target selection, by being better at raw damage output thanks to my mechanics, by being better at playing around a team that has strong players in some of the other positions. He doesn't do that, though. Now, the last person is Biofrost, and I have to say, for Biofrost, first of all, I find it very, very difficult to rate supports in the last couple of seasons on their individual play. I think you can only really rate them, first of all, on how they played with their laner, and then, obviously, in the context of, did they sync up with the jungler? Do they help gank the mid? Now, yes, Biofrost didn't do a lot in this tournament. I don't feel like he played badly, necessarily. You look at the fact that his jungle, mid, and AD carry were non-existent. They were just shitting the bed in the big games. They had a couple of them. Obviously, the mid lane carried a couple of good games. So Biofrost in general, I don't know what else he was supposed to do. Could you have a better player there? I feel like you could probably have a player with a shot calling presence from there. I know they thought they tried that with the Yellow Star, but Yellow Star wasn't suited to be Doublelift because he's not a 2v2 laner. So I still feel like Biofrost shouldn't necessarily be free from all criticism, and certainly perhaps could be changed. But I also think there were so many problems elsewhere. There were so many other bigger fires that I don't really have an issue with how Biofrost played overall. So now we've moved on from the players. Let's talk about the coaching of TSM, right? TSM routinely had draft issues, even in some of the games where they actually ended up winning. I have to ask this, first of all. This is something I'll ask my experts when I have them on my shows. Why the fuck are these NA teams, particularly TSM, so obsessed with Cho'gath Rise? Why did they think that if they get these champions, somehow they've like won the game already and that these are their comfort champions that are going to be really good? Because in this tournament, they were fucking ass. Those were not good champions for them. And if you looked in some of the other groups, the other teams trying to pick those over and over again, that wasn't that great for them either, actually. I mean, I realise Samsung's a different story, but you aren't Samsung, mate. And also, you haven't got that late game. So, you fix the fuck up. Then you've got to ask yourself, when you see these weird picks, right? Is this the coach? Because if the coach is doing all this and he has full control, which is what I'd like, right, well, it's easy. Let's get rid of this coach, because either we have to get totally new players in that fit the coach's style, or we need to put this coach and he has to go to a team that suits him more, because it's not this team. Now, if it's the players having too much input or having some sort of veto power where the coach says, I want to do this, and then they go, I just want to play this champion, then here's the thing. Ultimately, that still falls on the coach, Path, because he's delegating his responsibility and saying, yeah, you can make the veto call here. So he's responsible for the results. He has to still carry the can if it goes badly. Or if Reginald doesn't allow him to, now the buck goes up the chain to Reginald, and he's not allowing his coach to have proper control here. He's not allowing his coach to do the things that he's prepped for, and he's letting his players short circuit the draft, which is not a good situation, because then you end up with a shitty compromised draft where you didn't achieve what the coach wanted to do, and you didn't achieve the comp he wanted, and you achieve not really all the champions that the players would want, but you achieve some of them, and so you're in this weird middle point where your win conditions are all fucked up, and now you're relying on individual players who might not have the champions to support them to carry the game just because they want comfort or they want a specific matchup in this setting. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Koreans don't do this. This is one of the main reasons why I think Korean teams are much better. Forget all the players and all the practice and all that shit. It's because Korean coaches have a lot of the control in the pick ban. They can let players have a little bit of say, but their say is like, do you want option A or B? It's not, oh, well, I'm not going to do any of that, actually. I'm just going to go and pick this champion that we didn't plan for right now, or that I don't usually play, or haven't played because I've decided from 2 matches I saw that it's a good matchup. They're not doing any of that shit. So they come in with a clear game plan. Everyone knows the game plan. And if they fail to execute, they fail to execute. But they know the fucking game plan. I feel like you also, in this team, need a mode where when things aren't working, and we've tried over and over again, and the drafts are getting a bit wonky, now we've got to have a draft and a mode, in my opinion, where we go, right, emergency, and we break that little red box. And what we do is we get Bjergsen on a strong champion, and we say, this is one that you can play make on, you can do things on, and we're going to put Svenskeren on a champion where he can also do something, and he's not going to farm this game, and we're going to send the two of you, and you're going to terrorize the map, and you're going to go bot as much as you can, and you're going to fuck this map up, and we're going to have the kind of like a free-for-all mode that we're going to set up for you, because the way they play at the moment, it's just letting themselves... The one mistake wrecks them because they're already sort of waiting for the late game. It's not happening, is it? So you look at the group they were in. TSM should have been able to 6-0 this group if they'd have played into all their win conditions, if all their players had the best drafts and they'd all played well and the way they play in NA. They would have 6-0 the group. Because look at the opponents they had. One of the weakest groups you could actually get in this tournament. They had Misfits. Right? So coming into the tournament, none of the factors except the jungle logically could go in Misfits' favour. Because yes, Misfits has a jungler who plays around his team a lot more. To me, he's like the EU's Xmithy Max Law. And yeah, that was always going to cause problems. But in theory, there's all the strong laners on the TSM side, right? Well, first things first, in this tournament, what a surprise Alfari turned out to be. This guy turned out to be a very good top laner in a group where actually Hauntzer should have been the best top laner, and the other top laners aren't that sick, actually. Obviously, the one in Flash Wolves is fucking terrible. Then you look... The AD carry in Misfits seemed massively improved by the time the second week got there. Just seemed almost to have made like some ridiculous jump up in how he played in the lane. So suddenly, Doublelift, who was already having his issues, suddenly he's having more problems. Then, not only did the jungle outperform Svenskeren, but he almost dominated him in terms of how he outperformed him and outplayed him. And it really was quite embarrassing overall. Now you go and look at Flash Wolves. They should have been free wins as well. They were a team that weren't looking good coming out of LMS. But you know what? When you've got Carsa and Maple, who always perform internationally, who always play well off each other, who, even though it's not the meta style anymore, play as a fantastic jungle mid combo, they are always going to have a chance against Bjergsen and this version of Svenskeren playing this way. And so TSM should actually look at that squad, because I feel like that's more like what their squad should be like. They should have a Carsa and Bjergsen type setup, or they should get rid of Svenskeren. A Carson and Maple setup, rather. Svenskeren and Bjergsen. Or they should just get rid of Svenskeren. It doesn't make sense. WE, I thought should have been the toughest competition anyway, as I already said on the show. I feel like you look at that team, and this is a great contrast point to the fact that Bjergsen doesn't look like a superstar that much. Because here's the thing, Shie is in no context got the potential Bjergsen does. He can't be a top 5 player in the world. He can't be a top 3 mid at this tournament. He can't do any of these things. But what I respect about Shie is you put him in big international tournaments and you give him his limited champion pool, and this guy will fucking go off. He either does go off or does badly, but he does go off. He doesn't have games where he just does nothing. If you put him on bad champions, he can do badly, but it's almost like he demands good champions, he gets good champions. When he gets the good champions, he does well somehow. It just happens. And I don't think his team's that great either. So just look at how many more standout games he has in international competitions than Bjergsen, and you'll see some of the problem, because we consider Bjergsen a much greater player than Shie, and he is a much greater player than Shie. He's a much better player than Shie, but this is one of the obvious ways to contrast the problems. So, the expectations were never that TSM was going to win Worlds. But consider this, if they had have come out their group in first place, they would have gotten Cloud9. And then they would have had a very good chance to come top 4 at the tournament, and that's without almost anything changing. You only have to change like 1 or 2 game results to put them in that position, and not unrealistic ones either. And so you do that, suddenly they're top 4. Now, yes, they would have been a weak top 4, and they wouldn't have been anywhere near, in my opinion, the SK Telecoms and the Longzhu and even RNG. I think those are better teams. But it would have been a good result, and people could have said, right, what can we do for future years? If anything, though, I'm glad it didn't happen, because that could have been a world. This is a very realistic world where that could have happened. They could have come top 4 without too much changing. But in a world where that happens, I feel like it would actually hold NA and TSM back further, because then they think, well, there's no problems. Top 4, great. You know, there aren't any problems with how we use our jungler, or how we draft, or how we prepare. And Bjergsen, he's come top 4, so now he's delivered all that potential. He is a superstar mid. Doesn't matter that he has performance issues. That's why I actually am glad this happened, because I think it highlighted a lot of their problems. So the future for TSM, I feel like first and foremost, they have to get a different coach. That's the obvious one to me, because they can't be using junglers this way. Notice I didn't say jungler, I didn't say Svenskeren. They obviously can't use Svenskeren this way, but you go back, then you go back and look at Thorin, then you go back and look at even Amazing. I don't feel like generally they've used their jungle as well, or they've had a good sense of how to use the jungle and the mid. Then you go, And I think they need better leadership in game. I still think shot calling's an issue. I just think in NA it's not as big a deal. I think this season, actually, I don't want to hear anything about them having good shot calling because they just relied on these really good 5v5 team fights. So fuck shot calling. What shot calling? Then you got to look at shot calling as a communication topic of how the whole team communicates, right? The jungle and the mid of TSM, seemingly, you'd almost think that their mics were broken and they just didn't realize in the tournament. And bot lane and jungle and mid just couldn't communicate. So jungle couldn't communicate with bot lane and therefore was just off feeding while bot lane was just doing whatever. And then mid seemingly never communicated with bot lane. So when bot lane was being dived and the other mid was roaming down, Bjergsen was just still there, just getting some CS and getting a bit of tower damage. Now that might be that the bot lane's fucking up and telling me, I don't need you. Oh, stay back. I'll win the 2v3 like forgiven style. Maybe. But if that's the case, then there's bad communication there and that is shitty shot calling. So I feel like there were obvious flaws in that respect. Now, what the future is beyond that, because I've talked about style there, I've talked about coaching, you got to talk about the roster, right? First of all, the obvious thing to do, in my opinion, I don't know why they still haven't done it now, is you got to start using these import slots. Because remember, I personally think it's an utterly corrupt ruling that Bjergsen gets to be an NA resident, but they made Impact wait another year or two. I think that's absolute fucking bullshit. But since it's happened, since that is the way the rule works, you can have another import in your team. So use that import slot to get a world-class player of the style you need to cover a hole that you have in your team. And therefore, by patching up that and plugging that hole, the water level continues to rise from the stars, who are like the taps in the bath, and therefore your strengths will shine even further without doing anything else. It's obvious to me that with Bjerg as an NA resident, you should be getting another star player, perhaps support. I don't know. It depends what you want to do. Get another jungler, get a different AD carry. I don't know. It's up to you. I would personally go ahead and tell them, I think with how Bjergsen plays, especially as he likes to roam sometimes, I would get an aggressive jungler personally. I won't go straight to Dardoch because we know he has his issues. I'd say get Jankos. That would be a fucking dream come true, I think. I think even Hauntzer would love that. I would say Dardoch's got to be someone you consider, but then again, he's NA resident, so is there any point using an import slot up when you have one to spare? Consider someone like Lyra. I realize the communication is going to be an issue there, but he's such a beast. I feel like someone like Bjergsen would just play straight off Lyra with almost out having to ever talk because he'd just love having such an aggro jungler. If indeed that's the case, it's not Bjergsen who's the one corralling his junglers and making them play this passive farm style. I will say, I don't like the approach that TSM fans took of like, right, Bjergsen, Doublelift, who by the way were the key, they were the big names and the big stars who should have carried the games, but did have key moments that fucked up. The people who want to just wipe the slate clean and get rid of both of them, I feel like they're crazy. Because if I'm Immortals or I'm Cloud9 and I hear that Doublelift is available, I'm sending off a blank check and saying, how much do you want? How much do you want? Because just put you into my team that I have right now, and we're going to be fucking amazing. Yeah, he's still got some issues to work with. I feel like coaching could help that a lot. But he is still a very good player. And not only will he guarantee you do well in NA, but he still has the potential to be a great player internationally, despite all these worlds that he's been to and some of the issues he's had. Bjergsen, it goes without saying. I mean, this guy is the MVP or an MVP level player every single NALCS split. So first of all, it's a massive gamble to get rid of him in NA. Secondly, everyone except Cloud9 and Jensen, every other team should be getting the blank checkbook. Right, come to my team, any of you. I'll desperately need to have you on my team because Bjergsen is a fucking stud and he's the closest to getting over his issues in my opinion. He just has to work on some performance issues mentally, and I still think he can be a great player even though he hasn't quite shown it yet because he is domestically. He is a fantastic player and we know he does it season to season to season. So again, just a layman's thoughts, just my observations watching the game and thinking through my model of how I see TSM and how I see the game overall. It could have gone a lot better. They could have come top 4 with this very lineup. But with all of that said, there are some clear flaws. I'm glad that this happened to expose their flaws. And I hope the TSM org thinks on some of these issues and makes better decisions so that in the future, this isn't a problem anymore.
Welcome to Thorns and Thoughts. Unfortunately, I don't have any content. The man already speaks his mind, but I ain't gonna stop you now. I assume you saw a pretty fucking good video. Alright? And you're already on the man's channel. So stay a little while longer. I see you're comfortable. And just check a few more out.